there. I'm so excited to bring you our first Wedding Pro interview to the Wedding Planning Collective podcast. I'm going to be throwing some of these interviews in intermittently with our regular podcasts, and we're also bringing a video component to the podcast. So I'm really excited to introduce Brian Weitzel from Brian Weitzel Photography. He's been a photographer for over 15 years, and he is truly dedicated to his craft. His work is known to be emotional, candid, and timeless, and his ability to make his couples comfortable in front of the camera are equally impressive. While weddings might be his primary focus, his portrait and proposal photography is absolutely stunning as well, and so fun to see the behind the scenes work that goes into capturing these moments. About 5 years ago, Brian's incredible wife, Becky, joined him as a second photographer with their business, and they really do make the perfect team on wedding days. They have also been amazing friends of mine for longer than I probably would care to admit here. Having recent experience as a bride and groom themselves, they have a unique perspective of the industry, seeing what's important from not just the event professional side, but also the couple's perspective, since they have recently gotten married themselves. So without further ado, let's get into my episode with Brian Weitzel of Brian Weitzel Photography. All right, Brian, over the years, I know we have had many discussions about wedding photography and so many things involved in the wedding world. Definitely a lot about the wedding budget. But for today's conversation, I was hoping we could focus on some of the things that couples are thinking about in the early stages of planning their weddings when it comes to photography. But first, before we get into all that, I would love to have you give a little description on how you got into the industry and wedding photography.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me back again. I always enjoy
Absolutely.
our talks, and you do me the favor because I love talking about weddings. So if it's like I feel like I should be paying you for this experience.
A
Although
therapy session.
there's there's no payment involved in either direction. But anyway, to
Oh,
answer your question, um yeah, I it's a funny story. I actually got involved in wedding photography because I was a hungry college kid. That's 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 the actual lowdown. But I thought I was going to be more of a fine art photographer. I spent
okay.
some time living in Italy and photographing uh, daily life, architecture, lifestyle, and culture on a black and white film camera. And I
Wow.
came back and displayed my work at a gallery. And a couple walked through and said, "Hey, we love your work. Would you shoot our wedding?" And I said, "Absolutely not." And they,
Short answer.
that statue doesn't move. And you're a
Yeah.
bride and you do. And that scares the bejesus out of me. And they said, "Listen, we have an awesome family. It's going to be totally fun. Let's take you out to dinner and you can like get to know us a little bit." And I was in college at the time, and like most broke college kids, a free meal out sounded like a
Winner.
wonderful deal.
Right.
And I said yes, and they won me over, and I shot their wedding, and I still remember their names. I still remember the venue and everything. And immediately I just said, this is it. Like wedding photography is my calling because
Yeah.
it's incredibly stressful. It's very fast paced. It has ingredients of all different kinds of other photography. And I could just see that it would take a long time to master, right? You can
Yeah.
always get better at it. And it's just something that the challenge, the chase of like perfection, the chase of having like a perfect wedding where the timeline comes together, you know, the interactions between the bride and groom are just like authentic and that they're present emotionally and mentally in that moment.
Yeah.
Um, it's it's a wonderful challenge to step up to,
Yeah.
25, 30 times a year. And yeah, that's how I got into it.
Very cool. And you decided or maybe learned at that point that you like when the statues move and you can move
Yeah.
along to capture it. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
much more, much more.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I wasn't planning on some of these questions now I have for you after I don't think I've heard that story of your first wedding. It's really interesting. What were some of the things you were surprised to be those added challenges going from the statue, or I know you do beautiful portraits of, a lot of dancing studios. You'll go in and do some beautiful portraits. What is it that's surprising that is, or maybe not surprising, but maybe surprising for a couple, that are those added things that come into the mix on a wedding day versus going into a dance studio and capturing those still moments?
Sure. I think most couples, they see their friends' photos, they see photos on Instagram and stuff like that, and they're just like, "Oh, that moment looks magical." And what they don't realize, and you can just feel it 10 minutes in working with the bride, as soon as she gets her dress on, and you start saying, "No, we're going to get ready over here because the lighting's better. No, I'm going to change this. I'm going to move this out of the way so it looks nicer." And then you start working with them on posing. They're like, "Wait,
Mm-hmm.
I can't just stand here and put my my earring in." It's like, "Oh no." Like
That candid
we
moment
want
isn't, yeah.
yeah, we want you to look your absolute best. So we're going to approach everything with, an incredible amount of attention and detail. And I normally tell them a few minutes in, as I'm like kneeling down fixing their dress, I'm like, "We're gonna be playing a game of Simon Says today. It's gonna last about 6 hours." And they're like, "Yeah, clearly." You're like, "Yep." So one of the things I think that surprises most couples is that um, the emotion, even though the emotions are real and the moments are real, there is a lot of scene setting that goes into
Mhm.
creating a beautiful image. And my job is kind of like an artistic director. Like I have an idea in my head. I choose the location, I choose the lighting, I choose even the lens that I use makes a difference to create a different feel. And I kind of give you an idea how to position your bodies, and then I just nudge you a
Mhm.
little bit. Like I take you like 90% of the way there, and then I let you fill in that last 10%. I let your personalities come through. And sometimes in that moment, I'll even give you a little direction just to make the photo look that much better or more believable, or literally just to get your bodies and your faces closer. And
Yeah.
if your face is that close to someone, what do you typically do? You start laughing, right?
Yeah.
Like, "Whoa, okay, hello." So
That's
yeah,
what's
that's probably the biggest surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the funniest things is, definitely the trend now, it's not even a trend, but most couples will say that they don't like the superposed type of photos. They like the candid shots. But when you look at the shots then that either they're pinning or they're using as their inspiration, they're all posed photos meant to
Right.
feel more candid and in the moment. And most of us, myself for sure, is in this boat, but most of us are very awkward in front of the camera and you're not sure what to do. And Brian has humored me several times by doing our headshots and helping with that process. And it's so awkward when you're not used to that. And so having somebody that can in a natural way make you feel comfortable but also know how to do those things that make that earring photo. You're not putting your earrings in like you normally would on your way to work. It's your wedding day. You need to do it a little bit
Right.
differently. And so being able to spot those things that's a huge component of what a wedding photographer needs to be able to do, as opposed to just simply being another person in the room with the camera.
Yeah. When people say like, "I love the candids,"
Yeah.
it's like that that can be true. But a lot of times to get you in that candid reaction, that unanticipated, moment of facial expression, right?
Yeah.
Um, that doesn't happen just standing still.
Yeah.
That happens when you're given direction. That happens when you're doing something. Um, one of the things, like, I don't know why it works so well, but literally, my previous brides are like, they know it when they see the photo. Is I'll kind of like have the guy's backhand, and I'll be like, okay, just go ahead and slide your right hand down a little bit more, a little bit more. Okay, give her a pinch, and you can see him questioning. He's like, God, my hand's like on her butt, like it was on
Yeah.
her hip. I'm going down and down and down,
Yeah. Isn't
and
this
and then
inappropriate? Yeah.
yeah, and it's their backhand, so you can't see it, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, go ahead and show your wife a little love, right?
Yeah.
And her reaction just lights up. It goes from
Yeah.
smiling to like laughing to head tilting back to, pushing him away, and he starts laughing. And it's like, okay, that wasn't 100% a candid moment
Yeah.
because we put you in the pose. I gave you a direction, but the emotions and the reaction, that's 100% candid. And I
Yeah.
think that's really what you want, right?
That's what you're looking for.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and it's part of our job too to read the couple and read what they're comfortable with and
Hmm.
read their, you know, how they interact with each other. And
Yeah.
sometimes people need incredibly literal directions,
Yes.
like move your chin down to the left 2 inches. Okay,
Yeah.
and they do it. And other people, you just interact with them,
Yeah.
and you know, you're just on this fun conversation that lasts a few hours on
Yeah.
their wedding day,
Yeah.
and you get the shots that you need.
That's so funny as you're saying that. I'm thinking back to a bride this summer that we had that I knew had a background in modeling. And when the photographer, we were doing like the getting dressed and those photos, and I was lucky enough to just kind of, I was just kind of a fly on the wall in the room at that point, and I just thinking like, man, she knows exactly what to do.
Right. It just
you know
snaps
she,
into it, right?
she knows exactly like the different poses. But that's super rare, that you have somebody that knows how to do those things and can translate why this pose that, yes, in real life it feels super awkward, or like maybe the groom isn't pinching the bride's butt, like that's not his normal thing, but it gets that reaction or it gets that photo.
Right.
So yeah, that's
I
really amazing.
I think what helps, and I start off when I work
Mm.
with couples saying this, I'm like, I'm gonna pose as you so you can see what it looks like,
Yeah.
right? So I need you to stand right here, hips and shoulders facing in this direction, rock your weight to your back hip, right? Shoulders turn to the right. And I literally walk through it, and them seeing it, they're like, oh, okay, I got it.
Yeah.
And when I work with bridesmaids, like doing bridal party shots, it's like, all right, ladies, we're gonna bring the sass, we're gonna bring out that inner diva, we're going full Vanity Fair.
Yeah.
And they're just standing there like unsure, and I'm like, so if we're flat-footed, this looks pretty boring, right? But if I rock my weight to my hip, if I bend my knee, if I turn my shoulder, if I bring my chin over here, if I look, and like they always start laughing
Yeah.
because they're like, this guy's a bridesmaid, this guy can do it, like and
You
it's
got the
like, yeah, I
poses.
mean, I can pose with the best of the bridesmaids. But
That's so
yeah, I think giving them something to see, because that that bride who had a background in modeling,
yeah.
good for her. That's an incredible opportunity. No, the rest of us are normal people, right?
Yeah.
And I'll get that question sometimes, um, and I just say no. Like I I work with people just like you and me. So when you look at my galleries and you see the love and the fun and the laughter and all that other stuff, that's Joe the accountant,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like that's Noel the commercial real estate agent. And
Yeah.
it's just like they aren't pros at this. So
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that awkwardness wasn't there, but that's a part of the fun experience of the wedding day that ends up with this gorgeous image because you're able to. I think that's a huge thing with you too, is that you're able to um, get in there and do the poses rather than just spitting out directions that don't feel
Right.
relatable. That's kind of what makes the couples feel comfortable and the bridesmaids feel comfortable to kind of let that go. So I wanted to talk about some of the different types of wedding photography. I know that photojournalistic is kind of a way that couples are describing that candid type of feel. But for couples that are just starting the journey of either looking for photographers or trying to figure out what it is about wedding photography they like, what are some of the different styles or what should they be looking for?
I think the first thing you do is it's almost like eating, right? You look with your eyes. So
Yeah.
as you're going through Pinterest, as you're going through Instagram, you know, chances are you don't know who these people are, right?
Mhm.
Or that might even be a better way to do it is don't look at your friends' photographs, but look at random people.
Yeah.
And if you are drawn to a certain style, if you're drawn to just an aesthetic that you kind of keep seeing over and over and over again,
Yeah.
or um, that's a good place to start. And then
Okay.
try to refine that and say, okay, what about it? What about these photos am I drawn to? My main thing is like, I tell people, I don't want to take pretty pictures. I want to take like emotionally charged photos. I want to
Okay.
take photos that are important. So anyone can say, okay, pose number 32, right? And it's just like robots like going into the pose.
Yeah.
No, you want to take photos that have true emotions and that are, you know, significant.
Yeah.
That's the hallmark. That's a kind of my flag that I wave, right?
Yeah.
Um and so start off looking at photos that you enjoy and photos that you're drawn to. Hone it down and say, what is it about this that I like? Do I really like the high contrast black and whites, or do I like the softer, more, monochromatic? Or I'm noticing that I like the storytelling. The person's this big in a photo that's this big, but it's telling the story and the relationship of them with the architecture or them in an open field. Maybe you're
Okay.
really drawn to that.
Yeah.
Um, and ult- and ultimately, you're gonna find a pattern, and then look at who those photographers are and maybe how they describe themselves, and you're probably on your way. What I
Okay.
can tell you now is that there's probably several camps that I'd say maybe 5 camps that we all kind of fall into, right? So, like me, I'm true to life editing. My colors are exactly how you see them. I don't use
Okay.
presets or action packs or filters or stuff like that. I try to get it right in camera. And so that's called like true to life editing.
Okay.
And my style is I try to go for like timeless, classic, an element of portraiture, but then also an element of like photojournalism. There's other people that backlight everything, and you'll see that things are blown out and they call it like light and airy. And
Okay.
so
Is that
they're
gonna be
natural
what
light.
gives you almost that like the Instagram filter kind of look?
Yeah, it's like this like imagine like early morning sun like coming down and
Yeah.
kissing everything, you know?
Okay.
And and they like pull down their saturation, and it's a little bit more of a softer type of feel to the editing and to the photos.
Yeah.
Then you have the
Okay.
exact opposite of that, which is dark and moody. And that's like, hey, we're underexposing everything, and you may not even be able to see their face in some of these photos. And we
Hmm.
don't care about, Rembrandt lighting, and we don't care about a shadow gently falling off their face. It's like it's dark, it's moody. It's exactly how they
Yeah,
describe it.
that description.
And
Yeah.
the rules of composition are thrown out the window, and maybe you can make out kind of highlights of their body and shoulder and whatever. And some people
Yeah.
like that. Like I had a
Yeah.
cousin who got married, and the photographer was literally shooting film in the reception with no flash. And I'm like, these are not going to come out. But they were dark, they were grainy,
Yeah.
and you could kind of make out stuff, and that's what they wanted.
But that's exactly what they wanted. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you have two more that are left. One is like truly that photojournalism
Okay.
where it's unplanned, it's candid moments. Um, maybe your portraits aren't going to be so uh camera aware where they're like standing perfectly, like looking at the camera, looking at each
Yeah.
other, tilting their. It's going to be more like storytelling, like, hey,
Okay.
grab hands and run across the street. And if there's a car in the background, that's your story. There was a car in the background,
Okay.
right?
So that's different than like what we were talking about, where you're kind of staging. I don't want to staging not in a negative way, but staging those candid moments is different than the true photojournalistic
Yeah, true.
style.
So true photojournalism, I think, would be a wild ride. A true photojournalist is not going to talk at all on the wedding.
And you're not going to have that photo list of I want this and
Be
this and this. It's really
absolutely
just shoot whatever you
because
see.
exactly. You're just documenting. You're like a
Yeah.
war photographer. Like a war
Yeah.
photographer doesn't say, "Can you aim your gun over there? It looks better."
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
no. You're
Yeah.
you are a completely neutral, bystander,
Yeah.
right?
Which is
So,
super appealing to some, I would imagine. But you have to also know you're not getting that photo list of what a lot of couples are looking for.
right. Right. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
then the last one, and this one is really gaining some popularity, and it's they're tossing around the word like editorial.
Okay.
So take one part true to life, take one part photojournalism, and then add in on top of that this like edgier use of flash. And we're going to photograph you sitting on top of a bar with, chest down so we can show what dress you're wearing, what shoes you're wearing. We're going to photograph you holding a martini glass so we can show off your ring and show off what your
Yeah.
signature cocktail is. We're going to photograph, uh, maybe a guy sitting down and it's just his hand and he's smoking a cigar. And, it's like imagine just go to like a Louis Vuitton catalog, open it up, and start looking at like, okay, not only are we showing the product, we're showing the lifestyle behind the product.
Yeah. Yeah. I was
And
going to say like high
um,
fashion kind of concept.
yeah, and so
Hmm.
that's becoming more popular. The hard
Yeah.
part is that when you're in this game long enough, people go, "Oh my god, this word is trending."
Yeah.
Or photographers are sometimes like, "I'm kind of bored with what I'm doing. I'm going to start saying I'm this and I'm going to start trying to shoot that." And it's like,
Yeah.
no, it takes years and years and years to refine a skill.
Perfect
So,
that style. Yeah.
yeah, you can't become an editorial photographer overnight,
Yeah.
right? So you need to like really do your research, really look at not only their website but full galleries as well. Like, hey,
Yeah.
can you send me your last 3 weddings? And then look and see, is their style consistent? Is their lighting consistent? Are they getting the shots that I would expect, you know, in my own wedding?
Yeah.
And then you can make your decision from there.
So rather than seeing if their website has those target words that you're looking for, make sure that's represented in the work, because I would imagine too that most couples in the beginning stages of planning probably don't know. And to be honest, as a planner in this for like 20 years, I wouldn't necessarily be able to describe things the same way you just did with, couples don't need to know monochromatic or the composition style they like, or, do
Sure.
they like the forward or up the backlit, kind of look.
Mhm.
But anybody can look at pictures and, like you were saying, know which ones they're more drawn to. And you don't necessarily have to define it, but looking to see, like, what is it about these pictures we like over this other photographer, and kind of figuring it out that way. Is that kind of a good approach?
Yeah. And here's some advice. Don't hire a photographer based on price and then send them a Pinterest board and say, we would love our photos to look like this. Because that's the equivalent of going into like a Chinese restaurant and ordering Italian. You're
Yeah,
just like, wait, that's not what we do here,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, and so, you know, photographers are very specialized in what they shoot, how they shoot it, and you're hiring them for that level of consistency.
Hmm.
You're hiring them for that insurance policy that, hey, no matter what the day throws at me, no matter how far off the timeline we get, doesn't matter if it rains or anything like that, I can deliver you a solid portfolio in my style
Yeah,
because I've taken hundreds of thousands of photos. And when someone's like, oh, I saw this photo, can you replicate this? It's like, creating a meal from scratch without a recipe that you've never even
yeah,
cooked before. You're like, dude, I don't know. I can
yeah,
get maybe kind of close. I see what they were doing a little bit, but like, that's going to be tough. That's going to be
yeah.
tough.
So those inspiration photos are good for exactly that. Inspiration, like, this is the style we like, this is the vibe we like. Do you like that more editorial versus the true life, component? And then make sure you're picking a photographer that specializes in what you like, versus, like you said, finding that price and then try and mold them into something different.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So what are the and that's there is one thing I've seen in the wedding planning Facebook groups where it's like, my photographer came back and sent us these images, but it's not my style. So it kind of goes into what you were just talking about. Like, it is definitely a big no-no to pick a photographer for whatever reason, whether it's budget or whatever reason, and ask them to edit in a different style than that. And now, one thing that, trying to think how to one in the way that you've just described it, to me it's much more obvious that I think I think a lot of couples think that the photographer takes the picture on the day and then all of that is done in the editing behind the scenes. But from what you've been describing, there's
Totally
so
false.
much of that that's done on the day of, right? That whether
Correct.
it's lighting or the posing or any of that, you can't just take any photo and plug it into any of those five categories. Like, there's so much that goes into it on the wedding day to create that image that
Absolutely.
can't just be done in post.
Yeah. Our goal, well, I shouldn't speak for everyone. My goal is to get it as close to done, close to perfect in camera, right? The lighting, the posing, the even just distracting things in the background, right? I can't tell you
Yeah.
how many times I've literally reoriented me, told the bride and groom to just rotate a little bit so their bodies are blocking something that, like a parking cone. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You're like,
Or the
I
dog
don't want
pooping in
to
the
edit that.
background or something.
Yeah, I don't want to edit that out,
Yeah.
right? Because sometimes you can't. Sometimes the way it's lined up or whatever. So you your photographer, you really want to get it as true to your vision in camera, in the moment, as you possibly can. And what
Yeah.
that does is it also not only does it make us better photographers, and it also allows the couple to remember it as it happened, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if someone takes a portrait of me and they put hair on me, I'm gonna go, "What? That's not me." Like
Yeah.
that's not how how I see myself,
The AI
right?
Brian Weitzel, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, so by getting it correct in the moment in camera, it's far more authentic, far more genuine. The other
Yeah.
thing that it does too is that it speeds up your workflow.
Okay.
So, you know, as opposed to spending 20 minutes editing one image, and knowing that you have a portfolio of 1,200, 1,500 images, and in this scene you have 100 images and each one needs to be edited.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're pushing that alone right there is going to add days onto your editing.
Wow.
And when
That's
you're
one of the,
shooting one to two, real quick, if you're shooting one to two
yeah.
weddings a weekend, people are like, they're excited. They want their sneak peeks. They want to see their blog. They got the thank you cards to send out. We live in such an instant gratification world
Yes.
that they think that you just click a button and magic happens. And it's
And it
like,
can be Instagram ready. Yeah.
right. And no, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah, yeah, and that's definitely one of the things I wanted to chat about is the editing process. I look at the planner's role and photo video role are very flipped, where we put a lot of our not that there's no prep work, but most of the planner's job is in the prep before the wedding day, and then of course there's the wedding day itself, and then after, there's minimal stuff, loose ends to tie
Sure.
up and wrap
Yeah.
up. But after the wedding, we're done. For photo and video, that's like
Yeah.
just the starting point for you guys. You, of course, do the
Right.
prep work of, timelines and all of that, and then the wedding day. But the after the wedding is where, if I'm not mistaken, most of the hours are spent for a photographer, videographer. Is that correct?
Yeah. I saw a statistic online and it said for every hour that a photographer shoots, they spend 9 hours altogether on the
Wow.
business and stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought about that. I'm like, God, is that like true? And I'm like, it depends. I mean, some clients it is,
Yeah.
some clients, um, because, you know, we're doing, if they don't have a planner, we're helping with timeline. We're
Hmm.
helping with, locations. We're introducing you to vendors that we've worked with that we know and trust,
Yeah.
right? Um, we're showing up early on the day. We're prepping our gear. I mean, you there's so much that goes into it. My friends and family are always surprised that I'm like, "Oh, when I get home from a wedding ends at 10 for me. I'm still up at 1 a.m." They're like,
Yeah.
"What?" I'm like, "Oh yeah. I have to back up my cards onto my computer, back them up into two separate external hard drives, back it up onto a solid state drive that I then keep with me. I have to like upload the photos into Lightroom, export it as a catalog. Like you have this whole
Yeah.
system, this whole workflow." And yeah, so Kate, to answer your question, I would say 1/3 of our job is maybe 25% of our job is done before the wedding.
Yeah.
15% is the wedding itself. And then the
Yeah.
remaining 60% is afterwards, it's editing. Like I actually just
Mhm.
received an inquiry from a bride today. She said, I noticed that we're off your wedding schedule, your editing schedule. Because I just
Yeah.
started posting online because I've had so many double header weddings
Yeah.
that I normally have a turnaround time of like 2 to 3 weeks, and I'm having a
Which is
turnaround time of like,
crazy fast.
yeah, yeah. But that's that's the power of getting it right in camera,
Yeah.
right? Um, but with these double headers, I've had 2 in 2 weeks. You're like, wait a second, Like I can't double my workflow, right?
Yeah, you only have so
Um,
much time.
yeah. And I refuse to publish a subpar, that doesn't meet my standards
Yeah.
gallery. And I also aren't going to skip out on the number of photos that I deliver
Yeah.
either. So a typical wedding for me is right around like 1,500 images that I
Okay.
deliver. And I think this year
1,500. That's
already
huge.
this year I've had 5 weddings over 2,000.
Oh my gosh. Now, do couples
So,
expect to see every one of those 2,000, 1,500 to 2,000 images?
um, well, that's not what I take. That's what I deliver. So I take like 4 to 5,000, six
Oh my
thousand if it's a
gosh.
really big wedding. Like Greek weddings, they get in that circle dance. You're taking
You got thousands
hundreds
of
of
just that
photos.
moment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. They're
Wow.
throwing money on each other. Like there's some awesome moments that you can
So
capture,
that's
right?
when you get home that part of it starts. Of course, everybody hears the horror stories of what happens if those cards, the memory cards and just the potential technical issues. So a true professional photographer is going to immediately come home and back that up in several different ways. All of
Correct.
those 6,000 photos, I
Yeah.
would imagine you
So,
do that at that point before you can filter it out, which ones are the
yeah.
keepers.
So for the brides and grooms who are listening, one of the questions that you may want to ask your photographer is, uh, does your camera have 2 card slots?
Okay.
So we take precautions from the moment we buy a camera to make sure that your photos are safe. And when we take a photo, the photo is written as a mirror to 2 different cards. So if one card gets corrupted, we still have the other card,
Oh, wow. So
right?
even built into your camera alone, you've already got a backup of some sort.
Correct. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And
That's
so
amazing.
then
That's a great
then we
question to
make
add to the list then to ask.
yeah. Yeah. So when Nikon or whoever releases a new camera and they only have it with like 1 card slot, oh man, do people get upset.
Really?
Because it's like you just you just ticked off every wedding photographer who wanted that camera as a second body, like as a, cheaper. Like we have our
Yeah.
workhorse, right? And then you kind of have like a backup.
Yeah.
And yeah, so um your a question you can ask is, does your camera have 2 card slots? And the answer should be yes. And if not,
Okay.
understand that you're taking a risk, because if something happens to that card, it can
Yeah.
corrupt it and you don't get your wedding photos.
And that can happen to even the most experienced wedding photographer. Things happen, you know.
Kate, I was shooting a proposal, and my screen just went black.
Oh no.
And I was like, what? And she had already said yes. They hugged, right?
Yeah.
And he was just about to put on the ring. The screen went black. I turned it off, I turned it on. And you got to understand, for us, they actually, part of their selling features is the lag. How quickly can your camera turn on? Like that's a
Okay. Yeah.
published stat, because it's basically instantaneous, right?
Yeah.
I turn it off, I turn it on, it's still black. I pull the batteries out, I push them in, it pops up. The grand thing was 4 seconds of lost time, right?
That's a long
But
time for your heart rate in that moment, I
yeah,
would
well,
imagine. Yeah.
yeah, certainly in the moments that are being captured,
Yeah.
and I was like, what the heck was that, right?
Yeah.
Like what caused that? And so the good news is that 4 seconds, I got photos of the ring going on, and then she hugged him again. And so I got the ring going on, I got the end of the hug.
Yeah.
I didn't really miss, it wasn't like her initial reaction was lost or anything like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even the top the top rated gear, things can
Yeah.
happen, right?
Yeah.
So
Something can come up, something, and even just the things you don't want to think about, if a bag gets stolen or something like that. So that's why it's so important to talk to your photographers about their backup process. And I can't even imagine. I know I've talked to many photographers and videographers about exactly what you described, that coming home at the end of the night. And from my perspective, end of the wedding, whether we're there through the end of the night or not, I am exhausted. The last thing I want to do is sit and wait for something to upload. And I've never even uploaded anything. I mean, just knowing basic iPhone, like how long it takes to upload that kind of stuff, I can't imagine like actual high res images and all of that. You got to have some patience to
yeah.
be able to do that, and the importance, knowing how important that is, to do it right away.
Yeah, so there's a system, I won't bore
Yeah.
you with it, but basically it's like check and double check,
Yeah.
like trust and verify. So
Yeah.
literally the cards that need to go in are on one side. Once they are transferred, I put them out in a different spot. I write down how many images are on the card. I double check that all of them transferred, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then once they're all transferred in all the locations, I have 4 copies. I don't erase them until I need the card again.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like the amount of layers of protection that are built into a proper workflow
Yeah.
um, are it's an insurance policy.
Yeah. And that's, we started talking about the editing process. All of that is just to get you to the editing phase,
Yeah,
which is
the night
then
of. Yep.
about, so if you have an average wedding, 4 to 6,000 images, you deliver 12 to 1,500. How long does that take I can't remember what the word is. I know I've heard photographers use it, but to go from that 6,000 to, I'm sure there's
To
some that are
call.
easy to, like,
Yeah.
okay, we don't need, is it calling? Is that what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It sounds like call, like CALL, right? To
Yeah.
call someone, but it's CULL, and it's
ULL.
like, yeah, call. It's like, it's like one of those English things. It's like,
Yeah.
could we make it easier, right? Um, but yeah, so just to pick your portfolio in plain
Yeah.
English, some some photographers are like, oh yeah, I can do a wedding in 45 minutes. I load it into Photo Mechanic and I sit there and you're like, there's no way. Not
Yeah.
I mean, 15 years of this and I've got it down to maybe on a good day, like I'm on a tear, maybe 3 hours, but normally it's like 4 hours.
Wow.
So there's some shots that you're like, I only need one.
Yeah.
I only need one shot of your shoes in this style, and
Yeah.
I need then once I have that, I'm gonna move your shoes into this style, and I only need one of that, right? So there's
Maybe there's
some
50
moments,
of very similar images to that you can just, like, okay, we're done. We've got the good one. We don't need
yeah,
every version of it. Gotcha.
composition's good, lighting's good, focus is good, we're all set. There's no improvement because typically when we shoot, it's like, click, 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 like, and we're like maybe making tiny adjustments. And as you're going through, if you see, oh, it's tilted a little bit, you're like, there's
Yeah.
enough room for me to tilt it back. I'm good. I can keep that one. I don't need to like change it.
Yeah.
But then you get to other moments, and I think this is why my portfolios are a little bit larger. So anyone who's listening, the average you can expect is most people will say like, I deliver 60 to 80 or 60 to 100 images per hour of shooting.
Okay.
And for me, it turns out that I'm closer to like 150 images per hour of shooting.
Wow.
And uh, for me, I shoot through a moment. So if the bride and groom are on a rooftop and you got it, beautiful backlit, her veil is glowing, and they're just living in the moment. They just got married, and literally this just happened to me on Saturday. So I'm like, I'm going back, like
Yeah.
reliving 48 hours ago. It was just a wonderful, like, moment out of a book, right? It was just
Yeah.
awesome. And there's just this natural excitement, and her facial features begin to change as she looks at him and smiles, then looks with him and softens, then looks with him with adoration, and then, gracefully pulls him in and gives him a kiss, and then pulls away and tilts her head down and rests her forehead. And then, he gives her a little bit of an additional squeeze. And while they're squeezing, they go ahead and look at each other again. It's like, all right, each one of those little nuances is like at least one photo, if not two. If
Yeah.
not, I can zoom in and crop, I can go full body, I can go landscape and get them in relationship with the Detroit skyline in the
Mhm.
background. And so, literally, in those 2 minutes of interaction, I can deliver 50 edited images. Um, and then you figure, like, you're going to turn some of those into black and white as well.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's a long process. So for me, it's like, if it's print worthy, if it is, if you're feeling the emotion fully and not like, oh, he's like half blinking,
Yeah.
right? All right, well, he's out. If he's
Yeah.
if he's blinking, if he's licking his lips, if something is
Those-
pulling my eye away from what it should be on, if it's a little distracting, it's out of the portfolio.
Okay. And so you just have to do that 4 to 6,000 times for every wedding to
Every
get to
week.
the point where you're editing. Every week,
Sometimes
at least
twice a
once a
week.
week. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and then so still we haven't gotten to like actual editing of any, because I think when definitely when I think of editing, I think of, photographers, and I think this is true from what I have seen in like bridal groups and stuff. You put the photo in Photoshop and you make everybody skinny and perfect and flawless skin, and the sun is setting beautifully even though it was a tornado warning or whatever. And so all of that work that we've talked about so far is before you even get to the like actual editing.
Before you edit a single photo. Yep.
Yeah. Oh my
Yep.
gosh, that's so crazy. And so that, I mean, it makes sense why I would say the average photographer is going to say at least 3 to 4 months. Video is probably 4 to 6 months ish. The I know everybody is struggling to get that down, just because, like you said, that instant gratification of, my wedding was Saturday, it's Monday, where are my photos already? Like we're all just
Right.
so used to getting things right away, but that's crazy how much work has to go into that just to get to
What
those photos.
what people and so I make the trade-off, and I say, look, I'm not really big on sneak peeks for several reasons. One, Facebook is going to compress it, and the quality of that sneak peek is not going to be the quality that I see, right? Number two is, if I post it on Instagram, you're looking at it on a 5-inch phone, right? And I want you to view this as art. I want you to, like, spend time with it. I don't want you to see who likes it. I don't want you to, be distracted by hashtags or music or a reel, or, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
no, I want you to treat it like it's in an art gallery, and to sit with it and recall those emotions and recall those moments, and
yeah,
squeeze your spouse's hand next to you, and as you're watching it or looking at it, and and go like, God, I could just go right back.
yeah.
So for me, I'm actually not big on sneak peeks, and I think it's so normalized. I mean, it's expected that people are like, when do I get my sneak peeks?
Well,
And
and
I'm
it's
like,
so, yeah. I was just gonna say
I just
it's
say,
driven by social media, like you said. It's
yeah,
people want to share their photos right away, which I get, but it really is. It is most couples, I shouldn't say everybody, but most couples that want those sneak peeks like right away, it's because they want to post it somewhere and
Sure.
share, which is perfectly fine, but it
Oh,
does
I
take away from like
totally
what you
get it.
were saying.
Yeah. And so for me, what I do is I say, look, if I edit sneak peeks, that's going to take me 2 hours, let's say.
Hmm.
Realistically, 2, maybe 3 hours. Because you got to go through all the photos. You got to find the ones, you got to edit them, export them, whatever, deliver them.
Yeah,
But what I find is that when I used to do that and I went back to edit them, to edit the whole portfolio, I was like, wait, that's a little blue. I
yeah,
I'm gonna warm it up a little bit. Or like the way I would edit it the second time wasn't the way I edited it the first time.
yeah,
And for me, I say, and I would rather deliver your entire gallery 1 week earlier and skip the sneak peeks.
yeah.
And instead, I
Makes
would
sense.
rather put the highlights of your wedding into a blog post that you can actually sit down and enjoy and
Yeah,
relive your wedding day with 150 photos. Or you can share it with your family and friends, and you can look at, the photos on a large screen as
yeah,
opposed to on Instagram. So I'm the anomaly. Um, I'm not huge on sneak peeks
yeah,
because for me, I would rather spend that time getting the entire portfolio out to my clients
yeah.
than in making sure
Focus.
that it's like top notch than making you happy in the short term.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I would imagine that's also something like we were talking about the different styles in the early process. Obviously, keeping everything that we've talked about with in mind about like how that editing process is. If there's a couple that knows like we need our photos back, we need those sneak peeks, then that is a priority or something that you want to add to your list of questions that you're talking to your photographer about. But for most, it's worth it to be a little bit more patient and wait for the bigger
Definitely.
portfolio to be done.
The other thing too is just talk to your photographer. So I had
Yeah.
2 couples this year and they're like, you know, is there any way we can get like 3 photos for a thank you card?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's no problem,
Yeah.
you know? So I went through and I found like 15 that I thought would work, right?
Yeah.
Edited them, sent them over, and they're like, oh my God, thank you so much. It's more than we thought. Like, we're so appreciative. And you're like, yeah, just happy to help.
Just
Just
ask.
ask.
Yeah.
Like, it's it's when the expectation isn't discussed or
Yes.
they expect to see 80 sneak peeks the next day. And there are photographers that do that.
Yeah.
That's not me.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the next day, if I'm not shooting a wedding, I actually want to let your photos sit for a little bit. Um, I have something else to be working on, but
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I want to view your photos with a fresh set of eyes
Yeah.
when I start the whole process.
And that's how you help with that full story, telling that full story of the day by being able
Yeah.
to look back at it all rather than like those quick images.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really interesting way to look at it. I hadn't really fully thought that through. On my end, when I get images back from a photographer, I will often see I mean, hundreds for sure of images, but thinking and I will think looking through, I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to pick out the ones that are useful, for us to put either on social media or website or whatnot. But then thinking too that you've already gone through those and weeded out, but so even the ones we're looking at are still, the condensed version of it. It's a ton of work that goes into it. But
Yep.
that's interesting to
Thank God there's coffee, right?
yeah,
Just think,
right.
The coffee gods have blessed us.
Well, and it's good to know too that that's something that can be discussed in the early stages too, to make sure that the expectations, like you said, the expectations are there. So you're not after the wedding finding out that, oh wait, I've got to wait 6 months, when in reality you might have booked a different photographer that could do those sneak peeks, or the opposite, with what you described.
Yeah.
If and your turnaround time is always been very good, but yeah, it's definitely something that I would imagine a lot of photographers are struggling with, is that instant gratification that couples are used to. So that's
Well,
that's going to be tough.
the one thing I would say for your couples who are watching or listening is you're spot on with the video. People are shocked that it takes 4 months to 6 months for a video, and it's
Yeah.
like you know, not to go into too much detail, they're creating a movie. They've got audio,
Mm.
they've got editing, they've got storyboards and storytelling,
Yeah.
and there's so many moving pieces. For
Yeah.
us, if we have photos that are in the same location, like I just described that rooftop,
Yeah.
and I said within 2 minutes I can get 50 photos. Well, guess what? If I edit one of them, all of the edits are going to be 99% the same. So our editing is much more efficient.
Yeah.
Um, but if you're waiting 3 months for your wedding photos, 4 months for your wedding photos, I would like that almost seems excessive. I
It
don't
is,
know
yeah.
anyone that should take that long
Takes that
to
long.
edit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So most importantly, definitely that should be something you're looking at before booking your photographer, to make sure that you're comfortable with that. What would you say then is the average turnaround time now for wedding photos?
Um, I would say like 6 weeks or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's
Yep.
6 weeks though. That feels like an eternity after the wedding, when you're just
Right.
waiting for those photos to come back. But yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And the other thing too to consider
Mm-hmm.
is there's elements outside of you as a client, your control.
Mm-hmm.
So, this year, most wedding seasons here in Michigan, May to October. And
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty consistent with like sometimes different months are a little bit more popular. Back in the day when outdoor weddings were the thing,
Yeah.
July was the most popular day.
Yeah.
Then after enough heat strokes, people are like, I'm done with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I want
September
nice
feels
cooler
good. Yeah.
weather. But there's elements that are outside of your control. Like this year, my earlier wedding season was sporadic. And then
Yeah.
come August, it was nonstop, 6 weddings a month,
Yeah.
double headers, sometimes back to back weekends. So you're shooting 4 weddings in a matter of 2 weeks. And it's like, hey, when that happens, everything downstream is now pushed back.
Yeah.
And
Slows down a little bit.
there's no rushing. There's no like outsourcing.
Yeah.
You don't want your photographer to like outsource it's personal to me, but I would
Yeah.
not outsource like my calling or something. It's like, no,
Yeah.
because when I've gone back and looked, it's like you missed this moment and this, and I can do this with this, and you know,
Yeah.
so
And that's something that I know there are a handful of companies um that, at least locally here, that have the photographer that's with you on site the wedding day, but then there's a team that's responsible for the editing piece of it, which is how they can get things done quicker, because they've got a whole bunch of people just sitting in an office. That's what they do, is they call those photos and they go through it all. But in my experience, and I'm assuming you would probably say the same based on what you just said, that leads to a disconnect in the photographer that was there experiencing that day, being the one that's editing and pulling the photos in the moments you've described. Like, if you're there, you're the photographer taking the pictures, what moments like got more of a laugh out of them, or felt
oh
more
sure.
meaningful in the moment versus somebody else. And so I would imagine that's a really important thing to ask photographers too, if if that is important to you, which I think it is for most couples, is your photographer the one doing the editing, or is it hired out? Because that'll also
Right.
create kind of that disconnect.
You know, there's a whole spectrum of services,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's fast food
Yep.
and there's 3-star Michelin and there's
Yeah.
everything in between. And in the wedding market, there's the same thing. You know, there are companies that will give you photo, video, DJ, and a photo booth for
Yeah.
$3,500, right? And it's a deal. However, you don't know who your photographer is, or you're not
Hmm.
guaranteed to get that photographer. Uh, Sometimes you know, the first time you meet them is the day of.
Yeah.
They take those photos, they get paid, they hand them off to an editor. And if there's a problem or you don't like what you see, you're not talking to that photographer. You're talking to,
Hmm.
someone in HR. You're talking to a customer service rep.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just, I think that you're taking on unforeseen risk, unacknowledged risk
Yeah.
when you are going with some of those types of businesses.
Yeah. And that's
Um,
where it circles back, like everything else, to your priorities. If photo is super important to you, then you don't want to take that risk. For some couples, it's worth it if they're on a tight budget, or
sure,
they just need to make things work. Then that might be a great way. And if photography is not one of your main priorities, then that could be a great spot to save. But it's a huge, I think it's a lot more common than couples know how much things are
right.
outsourced for editing.
There's two thoughts that come to mind, and one is a piece of advice, and one is kind of a story. But the piece of advice is, when I meet with couples and stuff, I say, look, make your wedding your own and spend money on the things that matter to you. And if you do that, you'll really enjoy your day,
Yeah.
right? So I'll
Yeah.
meet with couples and they're like, we're having a live band and we want top shelf liquor. We
Yeah.
want a party. And what's not that important to them is photography. And
Hmm.
then when we build out their timeline and we get to pricing, they're just like, yeah, I think we're gonna go over here. And it's like, yeah, that's fine. I
Okay.
truly,
Yeah.
truly wish you the best wedding, right?
Yeah.
Like, and a happy marriage.
Yeah.
Make your wedding your own and spend money on the things that you value. And those two ingredients are, pretty much guiding lights to a
Yeah.
great day. The other
Absolutely.
thing the other thing that I was gonna say in regards to ingredients is like a good photographer is kind of like a chef. Like you give us ingredients, you give us location, lighting, 45 minutes for a first look. You give us these different ingredients, and we use them in a way that you wouldn't be able to do yourself, and we
Yeah.
we add value to your wedding day. We add value to your portfolio.
Yeah.
So that's why we all go out to eat, right? It's like I got the ingredients in my pantry, but I can't make that stuff,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I hire a professional chef who uses those same ingredients and probably way more butter than I ever imagined.
And you don't need to know
And
about it. Yeah.
right, it doesn't count if I don't add it, right?
You didn't put it in. You don't.
Uh,
Yeah.
and they're able to add value to those ingredients to make a dish that I can now enjoy and make memories around.
Yeah.
And uh, a good photographer does the same thing, right?
Yeah. I love that comparison.
So,
I think that's a great way, because I talk so much about weddings being based on your priorities, and every couple is so different that there are so many things when it comes to planning your wedding that are based on those priorities, and it can't be a straight answer for every single couple that this is what you spend on photo, this is what you spend on this, because
right,
those priorities are so different. But if you are somebody that appreciates that that Michelin star experience, or maybe not even Michelin star, but just the creative aspect of your meal, you're probably not going to McDonald's or Chipotle, every night. And so it's
Well,
worth it to
and
invest in that.
there's a big difference between price and value,
Yeah,
right? Like price is what you pay and value is what you get.
yeah,
And ironically, like last night, my wife and I, we were driving home and we've had such a busy week. We really haven't seen each other much. And it was just like we were both in like a funk, right? Like the thing that makes us happiest is each other. And when that wasn't happening, we were both
yeah,
grumpy. So we're driving and we passed one of our restaurants that we used to go to when we were dating. And it's a nicer place. I said, "You want to stop in real quick for dinner?" And she's like, "Yes." I'm like, "All right, great." And she's like, "This is so nice. We don't do this kind of thing." I said, "Yeah, I
yeah,
know. Like I'm looking forward to just slowing down and spending time with you." And we get the menus. We order our meals. The plates are smaller. Uh her dish was dry. Mine hit barely. It was like the price was not reflective of the value, and
yeah,
she was trying to like bite her tongue and like not complain and not let it ruin it. And by
yeah,
the end of the evening, the bill came, and we were both like, "I think this is probably the last time we need to come here." And it's like
yeah,
that's a nice way to say it.
yeah,
The price didn't reflect the value,
yeah,
and a valuable vendor is someone who will go beyond their scope, right? So, like when I
mhm,
meet with clients, we don't talk just about photography. I also say, like, let me help you design a timeline.
yeah,
Let me let me recommend different locations to you that sound like they would match your wedding.
yeah,
Who else do you need? Do you need a florist? Have you thought about this? Oh, you're looking at getting married over here, you need a permit. I'll send you the PDF for that.
yeah.
And this is all before they even sign on the dotted
That you're
line.
even booked. Yeah,
And so I think they pay a price, but ultimately when they get back their photos, and I hear it many times over, like, "You're such a calming presence on the wedding day." Like, "Oh, I couldn't, like, you just made the day so enjoyable." It's like, yeah, that's the value.
yeah,
That's the value. So,
yeah, absolutely. In that work that goes above and beyond what that people think you're just clicking the button, like we kind of started talking about, you're just clicking a button.
yeah,
I can do that, right?
I
Yeah,
wish.
there's
Oh, I
so
wish
much
that'd
else
be
that goes
great.
into it. Yeah, yeah. Well, I have one final question I wanted to ask you, Brian, before I let you go. What is your favorite moment on a wedding day? And I'm sure it varies, but do you have like
Oh,
one particular moment that you're always looking forward to, or that you reflect back on more than others after a wedding?
there's a number of them. The one that I really enjoy, I mean, I love this moment, is they kiss, they say I do, they're introduced as husband and wife. And I love it because it's a hard shot to get and you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah,
A lot of times they're looking at their family and friends. It's a, you don't know how fast they're going to be walking at you.
yeah.
That's a challenge, right?
You want
You got to
both down
remember
the aisle.
if there's a baptismal font behind you, because that you could go swimming,
You don't
right?
want to be that
Uh,
photographer that goes viral.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. But the walk down the aisle is the first time in an hour that they can finally express themselves. They
yeah,
can finally, be joyous, right?
yeah.
Because the ceremonies, for the most part, are following traditions. And
Mhm.
if it's a church ceremony, it's going to be,
Be a bit stuffy.
a little bit more reserved. Yeah.
Yeah,
And respectful of the traditions. So that moment where they get to walk down the aisle is a lot of fun for
yeah,
me. And a lot of times I'll kind of stop once they get halfway down or they're kind of getting near the end of the people. I'll
yeah,
tell them like to kiss, and the kiss is always interesting too, um, because it's like Do they kiss? Does he put his hand on her hip? Does she get into it and drop the bouquet?
Yeah.
Do they dip? You know?
Yeah.
But um just this last wedding that I shot I was mentioning the rooftop and I was like reliving it. Um the vows, because it was a smaller wedding, it was only about 12 people. It
Wow.
had this like really magical, intimate feel to it
Yeah.
where it was so small that there was no traditions and expectations. And when they giggled during their vows and when they made a mistake and when he stops and goes, can I get one of those, because I can't even see, and he's wiping his eyes, and everyone laughs along with him.
Yeah.
um I found myself actually crying behind the camera, and I
Yeah.
told the bride at the end, I said, you know you do so many of these, you kind of just get used to certain moments, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, but I found myself getting teared up during your vows, because I'm like, they were just so real
Yeah.
and they were so special, and hearing what you had to say about your journey, and I'm like, it was such a good reminder of why I went into wedding
What?
photography, because we're
Yeah.
taking important moments. So to answer your
Yeah.
question, Kate, I love the shot coming down the aisle, but any moment that I'm lucky to experience, because without a
Yeah.
camera I otherwise would not,
Yeah.
like, that just that and it's not a job, it literally like enhances my life, right?
Yeah.
Like when I think back of like some of the most life enhancing or insightful lessons I've learned, it's oftentimes in the presence of other people when they are at their most special or most like vulnerable selves.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the joy of wedding photography. I mean, front row view, right? Front row, unlimited access to life's best moments.
Well, it's
And it's an awesome job.
yeah, I was gonna say being in this industry, it is something that, like you mentioned, it is there are times where it's easy to disconnect the I don't want to say that it's like it's just a job, because I don't think any of the vendors that I often partner with or mesh well with, none of us look at this as just a job. But
Yeah.
sometimes you kind of lose that. Not I'm saying this horribly, but there is you kind of the significance of the day can sometimes
Yeah.
be a little muted compared to
Anything
yeah.
anything that's repetitive, you start to grow immune to it.
Exactly.
Like,
And yeah, but those moments, there's always at least a handful of those moments for every wedding day where it's like, this is amazing. This is really cool to be a part of this day and capturing that, whether it's with
oh, for
photo or
sure.
just being able to kind of be a part of it. Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I mean,
amazing.
you get to see stuff with the bride getting ready, and she has a special gift for her dad that no one knew about, but you have it, right? And you
Yeah.
get to like deliver it and then stand in the background and watch as this like old stoic man, gets teary-eyed. And
Yeah.
I I mean, I was just making that up, and I realized I took a photo of someone that we actually know on their wedding day sitting on a bed in
Yeah.
Royal Park Hotel, and this dad is bawling, and she reaches out and holds his hand, and
Yeah.
it's like you could tell that that was a moment for them
Yeah.
of deep connection.
Yeah.
And for me to get that shot, I was literally like sitting on a toilet in the bathroom as far back as I could. Oh, that's so fun. Yeah, that's the
Well,
behind the scenes stuff that we don't talk about.
yeah, the
But
actual behind the scenes of how these moments come together
yeah,
or what it is, it's comical for sure.
yeah, getting enough room to frame them inside the doorway to get the shot so it felt like I shouldn't have even been there. Yeah,
That's so
that was a funny
funny. I
one.
love it. Yeah. You need to have the reality TV camera on you or something to see what it really is behind the scenes of of prep and
Oh
ready
my
for
God.
the wedding day.
Well, that's a whole nother topic, but I think what surprises people. Just like I was saying, like, hey, we're gonna play a game of Simon Says for about the next 6 hours. People are
Yeah.
like, oh wow, okay, I didn't realize that much detail went into posing.
Yeah.
Um, you see these beautiful moments on Instagram, and you're like, hey, to get that, you need to leave dinner so we can go out
Yeah.
to the tee box or the golf course and go walk by ourselves, you
Hmm.
know. So sorry that if you want that shot,
This is
this
the
is what it looks
sacrifice.
like behind
Yeah.
the scenes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's so many of those things throughout the day. It's Instagram is a blessing and a curse. It
Yeah.
sets our expectations high.
Yes.
And then sometimes the reality of what it takes to get that shot. Um, yeah, it's 85 degrees out in broad daylight in July.
Hmm.
You're sweating, you're uncomfortable, but it's an outdoor wedding and we're all sitting on hay bales, and this is what you envisioned. And guess what? You can't smell things on Instagram, but you
Yep.
can smell them on
Right.
the farm, right?
I think
It's
every
like,
vendor has those weddings where it's like, okay, yes, I love sharing these beautiful images of this day and how everything came together, but in the back of the vendor's mind, it's like, oh, but that was chaos. That was, or that weather was insane, or the things that again are out of our control, or that created that day. But we got to the moment. That's
yeah.
the goal.
Well, and I'll finish on this. And typical of us, we try
Yeah, it's like
finishing
last
3 times, but
question.
there's
30
always
minutes later.
something more to talk about. Uh, but a piece of advice for anyone listening is just be present. Just be
Yeah.
present and roll with it, because if something is going wrong, the only person that knows it is like you,
Yeah,
right? You and maybe a
absolutely.
handful of people.
Yeah,
Your guests are happy for you. They're happy to be there. They're happy to see you.
yeah,
And the couples that look back and enjoy their day the most are the ones that are just present mentally and emotionally in the moment.
absolutely. I agree
So,
100%. And I think that's a going into the choosing your vendors is so important to make sure that you can relax and just leave it on them and know that you've hired professionals and they're gonna make everything happen for you. Yeah. It's a
absolutely. And
big
I
thing
think
to do.
even my dog was agreeing with me in the
Yeah.
background if
It's like, all
you could
right, come
hear
on. Are
him.
you done talking yet, Dad? All right, Brian. So before I let you go, I know we've got engagement season coming up, and I'm sure you're probably doing some proposal shoots. So I want to make sure people can find those, see a little bit of the behind the scenes of your proposals. Where can everybody find you on Instagram?
You can just find me at my name, which is Brian with an I, Brian, Weitzel, Weitzel, photo. And
Cool.
that's my Instagram. Yep, that's my Instagram account. And if you type that in to a website, it will bring you to my domain as well.
To find all your work. Perfect. Well, thank you
Yep,
so much, Brian. I really appreciate your time. I have no doubt that you'll be back to talk more about budgets, videographers, whatever else we can talk about. I'm sure we'll have you back soon.
happy to do so. Take
All
care.
right. Thanks, Brian.